Okay, what did you say it was? It was www.
Borlaug.tamu.edu.
Borlaug.
That's what I'm like, I don't know.
Right. B.
What?
Okay. Borlaug dot
TAMU.
TAMU.
.edu. Yep.
Yeah, so like, you don't think the summer? So. So I think I had a couple, I like two or three, I don't have to take for 41. I think that, I think. Okay. I don't remember. Okay. I don't think that, then I think 41 or something like a similar. I did that about the last semester, so I'll think that is pretty. This is the last.
Is that right? Do I have that URL right?
Yep, that's it.
How many speaker series have you guys had already? How many have there been? How many have there been? Sorry, how many speakers have there been?
Speakers? This, I think 5.
5 already.
Yeah, this semester.
And
Yeah,
it's-
this will be the last one of the semester, and then we'll start up again next semester with a new series.
Very cool. Who do y'all have on the slate?
Hmm?
What do y'all have on the slate for?
Nothing yet.
Sorry, I'll Yeah.
Okay, you're too good.
Am I gonna be recorded too?
Yeah, it's just all live. Yeah. If you wouldn't mind standing at the podium, that would be great.
That puts him here. I want you to adjust it also. I do. Something. Yeah. Do you want us to go ahead? Or?
Yeah, go ahead whenever you're ready.
There's Gary. So, Howdy! Howdy! Great. Well, happy Friday to everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Stephanie Kurz, and I work at the Borlaug Institute. I'm being told to move to the podiums because Gabe is recording this for the live updates. We are really excited to have all of you here with us today. You guys are in for a really special treat. Amy Baker with the 2Seeds Network, she's the executive director, is here today to talk a little bit about the organization, kind of the model, structure, philosophy behind the organization, and also to talk about opportunities. So it's great to see students here today. If you're interested in doing work in Tanzania, you've definitely come to the right place. Amy's going to do a little bit more thorough background, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to her. But again, thank you all for being here. Please ask lots of questions, and I'll turn it over to Amy.
Thanks. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see so many faces here. I am really excited to be here and to be invited to be part of the speaker series. Gabe let me know that there's a minute delay on the live stream, so I feel like I have a minute to say anything I want and cuss for about a minute long before I'm cut off. Just kidding, Mom. Just kidding. But I am very excited to tell you a little bit about 2Seeds today. Tell you a little bit about how we kind of approach development work, particularly right now we work in Tanzania, and how there's potential for people in this room to get involved with us in the short term and long term. So we're going to cover a lot of ground here. And before I start, I was hopeful that I could get to know the room a little bit, and then I'll introduce myself so you get to know me a little bit. But just so I understand who's in the room, can you raise your hand if you are a master's student of any type, a master's level student? Okay, got some of those. If you are staff at Borlaug, great. If you are a teacher at Borlaug, a professor of any kind, okay. If you're an undergraduate student, okay. Raise your hand if you are a freshman or sophomore. Okay, we got some young blood here, great. If you're a junior, okay, raise your hand if you're a senior. Keep your hand raised if you're a senior who doesn't know what you're doing after you graduate. Okay, great. So you're so happy I'm here right now. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm the executive director of 2Seeds, and I'll tell you more about the organization, but we are young. We're about 4 years old. We were started in 2009, not knowing we were starting as an organization, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that history. I came in as the executive director in 2012. Before that, I was working with a domestic anti-poverty nonprofit called LIFT, which is headquartered in Washington, D.C. We work with homeless and unemployed populations across the United States using volunteerism to help people get on their path out of poverty. I actually started in that role as an AmeriCorps member. Raise your hand if you know what AmeriCorps is. Good. Okay, sometimes more hands have gone up over the years, which is great. AmeriCorps is the Domestic Peace Corps in a subject line. And I served my year in Washington, D.C., working with LIFT. It was a great experience, and that was kind of the first career move in my career of service that I've kind of taken on throughout my life. Before that, I was at Providence College, a little liberal school up in Rhode Island, where I was studying public and community service. And so the syllabus, the whole point of that program was really to understand communities. How do they work? How do you build them? How do they function? How do they move towards social change? So being here, working with 2Seeds, and being at an institution today where selfless service is so much part of the value system here, I think speaks to who I am as a person and what we are as an organization. So I'm glad to exchange on that front for the next hour. So let me tell you about 2Seeds. It's often called an agricultural development nonprofit. We kind of look like one, we kind of talk like one, we kind of smell like one, but what we call ourselves is a human capital development nonprofit. And we believe that what we're trying to grow in our seeds, so to speak, are people. And when people are at their full potential, they are able to achieve the challenges and help to solve the challenges that they have today and the ones that none of us can predict on the future. And we think that's really the sustainable change that's going to help move us along the path of some of these big challenges we have in the world. But where do we start? We start with small questions like this one. This is a very large question. What is poverty? And I'd love to just hear from folks in the room. If you were to be posed the question, what is poverty? How would you respond? Yeah.
Lack of opportunity.
Lack of opportunity.
Basic needs of life aren't met.
Okay. Basic needs not met. Taylor?
Depends on the country you're in.
Depends on the. Can you say more about that? What do you mean by that?
I mean, poverty level here is different than what it would be in a developing country.
Okay. So different levels of calling poverty depending on where you are in the world. Yep. Maybe one more. One more. Yes, in the back.
If the family makes below $22 a year.
It's almost like I planted you over there. Yes, that is, if you are federal level of poverty in the United States is family of four making less than $22,000 a year. And that's how the U.S. government defines it by a material measure. The UN defines it a little bit differently. The UN would say fundamentally poverty is a denial of choices and opportunities. It means a lack of basic capacity to participate effectively in society. And so the tone here is much more about when you are poor in options, when you are poor in resources, that is when you are limited in your choice, and that is when you're limited in opportunity, and that is really the true definition of poverty. So let's talk a little bit about 2Seeds theory with that backdrop there. We think a lot about productivity in a community, and to your point, it's Taylor, right? Taylor, to your point, productivity looks different wherever you are in the world. It can look like agriculture in one part of the world, it can look like much more industrious in another part of the world. But if we're talking about productivity, our belief is that the lack of productivity in society perpetuates poverty from a material perspective alone. When you have, so poverty then defines human agency. You have a denial of freedom to choose. And then we're starting to get into that definition of the UN. You don't have the opportunity to choose, you don't have that freedom. The lack of fundamental choice is what compromises our human dignity. It allows us to not meet our full potential as human beings. So then our question becomes, what limits the productivity of community? And this is where 2Seeds practice comes into play. There's a lot of Prezi going on right now. Restoring productivity in society is the solution to poverty. If we take that as the premise that we believe here. And productivity comes from the development of human capital. That's what we believe and that's what we work out, but what does that even mean? Human capital is a person's productive potential, and we think there are two major components that make up that definition of human capital. Competence, which is your knowledge, your skill set, what you know, your level of maturity, what experiences you have behind you, but also your connections. When you're in a tough spot, who's on your bat phone to call? Who has the resources around you to be able to answer questions that you maybe didn't know you had to answer and never had to before? So who's your safety net? Who's in your kind of hotline to call? Those connections. And when both are strong, you have a high human capital. You're able to meet your potential for productivity in the community and move the needle mostly in the ways that we see needles need to be moved: food, income security, meeting basic needs. So human capital can create choice and opportunity, and choice and opportunity restores and upholds that dignity to be pushing forward on meeting your full potential. So then our question for ourselves internally becomes, if we assume that's all right, which we do believe as 2Seeds, how do we create opportunities for human capital to be developed within our communities? We're not throwing money into communities. You can do that. That's very easy to throw money into things. But the real sustainable development happens when people are built with both their competence and their connections to sustainably solve their own challenges. That's our organization. We kind of exist in, this takes formation and manifestation in three areas that we focus on as an organization. The first, and I think this goes, yes, good. The first is to equip people with the skills, connections, and information that they need to improve their productivity and sustain that growth over time. So again, that human capital, how do we bolster that for the communities we work with? The second is to create an environment where problems can be solved and second chances are allowed. This is crucial. What we have found and what we know to be true is that when risk looks high, innovation is stunted. So when you have little resources, you're not sure if you're going to be able to make that month's payment or get to the next season, hunger season, see that through. People are less likely to take risks. And when you're less likely to take risks, less innovation happens. And so what we try to do as an organization is create an environment where you can fail, and failure doesn't mean the end. It means we iterate, we try something new, we get back on our feet, and we persist on a resilient path. And then we embed people in a web of relationships and community in which each member is invested in each other's success. So this is a spin-off of that connections piece. But the real sense that you can take that step into innovation and risk. If you believe there's a trusted relationship there, there's a trusted community who's going to help you should things go wrong. And we take this very seriously, and we take this by way of both sides of what we do, both with the farmers that we work with in Tanzania, as well as the project coordinators who are year-long volunteers. We're trying to build up the human capital of anyone who touches this organization in any direction. And these are the 3 pillars associated with that. And we do this because of this idea. This is our big bet. This is what we think is going to happen no matter whether we bet on it or not. The challenges facing our world are very big. Climate change is coming. Education systems are failing. Race relations, gender relations, name it, right? Challenges are very big. They're going to require unparalleled and value-based creative problem solvers around the globe. And we think that building up the human capital of people to solve those challenges, again, to be able to be creative about the ones in their short term and the ones on their long term, is the way we're going to be able to tackle this as a society around the globe. So I can tell you that's kind of the basis of the philosophy of 2Seeds, and I kind of spun through that and definitely eager to go more into questions on that stuff during the Q&A. But that's the basis in which now I want to move us to understanding what the organization looks and feels like in Tanzania and our work in the agricultural space there. The best way for me to do this is to bring you there. That's very far and very expensive for us to do that. However, we have a quick video here, 4 minutes long, that I think does a really good job of showing you kind of the life and work in which we operate. I think this sound's going to work. Sound? Gabe? Sound?
The purpose of 2Seeds is for everyone involved to reach their fullest potential. We believe that human talent is universal. It's as prevalent in the United States or Brazil or other countries as it is in the smallest village in Tanzania. What we try to do as an organization is identify that human talent and give it just enough structure and organizational support to realize its fullest potential.
We are currently working in Tanzania. We have 9 projects now, 8 of which are located in the region around a town called Korogwe. Most of our projects are based in rural villages in a variety of kinds of climates. Each community has its own particular needs, but all of them struggle to provide food and income for themselves throughout the course of the year. So our focus is on agricultural development, but we believe that our work can and will have catalytic effects within the communities that we're serving.
I think one of the unique things about 2Seeds and the 2Seeds model is that project coordinators are not outsiders. They're actually part of village life. I think that is a really unique approach to solving this problem.
Community here is like a completely different concept than community in America. It's such a culture of hospitality and it's such a culture of relationship. And so that took a lot of adjusting to actually. But I think that in a way, especially the way that 2Seeds is structured, it was really coming in here, and our biggest priority was like forming relationships with people in the community, spending a lot of time focusing on that with people in the community. And from those relationships, building a project that was sort of built on the trust that we had, built on the information we gathered through these relationships, and just spending time with people.
The project coordinators are in such a great position to actually experience what it means to have a leadership competency, as opposed to being thrown into a place where there's a lot of structure, a lot of rules, where a boss is telling you how to operate, a company is telling you the way to behave. They're instead having to formulate all those things themselves, and by doing so, they're starting to really understand what it means to be self-aware, what it means to be resilient, what it means to really be a leader. And I think that's such a great opportunity for each project coordinator.
You're pretty much out here on your own, and the only people that help your teammates and potential partners.
It can be really challenging at times, but it's also one of the most rewarding experiences. In some ways, it's like the willingness to jump in and the willingness to get your hands dirty, and also it's sort of an openness to the culture here, I think, that really unites all the people who are working here.
So that's a quick 4 minutes on 2Seeds. You can get that on YouTube anytime. I think it does a good job of showing you the communities in which we work, getting a sense for the part of the world that we're in and the way we approach that work. The quick baseball card facts on 2Seeds is that we are a network of 8 community-owned projects in rural Tanzania. We have 16 project coordinators right now on the ground. It's our 4th class on the ground, and that's in teams of 2, so 2 project coordinators for each team of 8 projects. We work with about 1,000 Tanzanian farmers every year. Most of our projects are 3 or 4 years old. We've been working with the same Tanzanian partners over that time. You know, we work in a variety of climates. So we have 2 of our projects that are up in the mountain climates, much cooler, great soil, can grow a lot of different crops. We have 3 projects that are in the valley, so we have a variety of climates there. And then we have 2 projects that are on the plains, so very dry, been hit pretty hard from climate change, lack of rains, very prevalent there. And each of our projects looks very different. You're feeling this in the video, and I hope you felt it in what I was saying earlier in terms of the philosophical approach of 2Seeds. But we really believe that we are not there to be experts of anybody's life or any way that they should be operating. If we are able to become a resource, a live-in community resource with our partners, we're able to dream together, we're able to build together, we're able to implement a project together that will move the needle on their food and income security. So some of those definitions of poverty as well. So that has looked very different from project to project. I can't say we build wells. I can't say 2Seeds build schools. We build human capital, and that takes shape very differently in villages. So we have everything from farmers co-op, that is coordinating both crop selection and distribution, transportation to market in Lutindi. And we have a school farm in Magoma in which the students are building, the students have planted out a shamba, and the community helps. We have community members in Magoma that come and help harvest and sell the crops that then feed a school lunch program twice a week. And so that school lunch program has skyrocketed attendance, and the parents feel incentivized to send their kids to school in those days particularly. And so now the headmaster is really invested in that community and in that project. So again, it's looked different depending on how it plays out. I thought the best thing I could do to give you a sense again of what 2Seeds is really about and how we work is to walk you through 2 particular projects a little bit deeper. The Kwakaliga project is a project that it's probably my favorite one to talk about. And I forgot this is being live streamed to all the other project coordinators in Tanzania right now. The secret's out. But Kwakaliga is a very special project in our network. It was actually our flagship project back in 2009. 2Seeds started, I'll say it out loud, a little bit by accident. There was a group of Americans who were on a trip, blended professional personal trip to Tanzania. They found themselves in Korogwe, which is really a pass-through town between Dar es Salaam and Arusha, if you're familiar with the region. And one of the members of the group fell a little ill one day while the rest of the group went out, and he got to watching how the farmers in that area were kind of bringing their crops together and bringing it to market. And he had an operations mind, a business kind of school operations mind on this, and thought, hey, kind of struck up a conversation with this gentleman, Edward Komba. Have you ever thought about X, Y, or Z? It might turn into A, B, and C. Komba's like, no, what might happen? I don't know. I've never tried this before, but this is how it has looked in some contexts that I've seen distribution play out. And they got to talking over the next few days. Komba and Jim got very excited about what they were doing and just the conversation that erupted. And Komba said, you've got to stay and help us build this. So I've got 5 kilometers of land. Let's see if this plan this thing we've been talking about might have legs. Can you stay a little bit? And Jim said, I really am due back home, but what if I sent you 2 people? Would you host them? Would you work with them? Would you see if this plan could work? And Kumba said, of course, send me 2 people. I would love to see if we can make this work. So it was the summer of 2009, I believe, that Sam and Jesse, 2 folks that Jim originally knew, were over, and they got to know the community really well, got to understand the needs, the assets, the strengths, where there really was opportunity, and built out more of a production in that Shamba, more of a production project that upped the quality of the crop that they were built. I think it was maize that year, and then got it to the market coordinated so that the prices went down, the cost overall went down, and their profit increased. And so that community that year really decreased their hunger season that they fell into pretty dramatically. And a bunch of communities then were knocking on our door, and we're like, we would love to see what just happened here, if it could happen in Magoma, if it could happen in Lutindi, if it could happen in Kajubamoto. So that's how 2Seeds began. It was a very humble conversation. It was not this grand plan, this is how we're going to change the world. Our grand plan, this is how we're going to change the world, is let's have a conversation and see if anyone's interested and see what we can do together without having an agenda. And from there, we've become an organization. The dirty little secret about Kwakaliga, our flagship space where that first project happened, was that there was no rains for 3 years after that. So we had this great championing storyline to go, and communities were now knocking on our door. And the problem is now in our original project, we were really struggling to feed people and to help them kind of build out systems that was going to keep that going, keep the hunger seasons eliminated or at least decreased. So it was a really tough go. The next class that came to Kwakaliga specifically were riding this momentum. They didn't yet know there weren't going to be rains for 3 years. They were riding this momentum of this flagship project, and they were working on sunflower seeds. They realized that the oil of sunflower seeds were going to be at a premium in the market at the time that they're going to be able to harvest. So this is great. This is what we're going to do. The community was really excited about it. They planted the sunflower seeds. No rain, failed harvest. Pretty demoralizing experience. What are we going to do? Well, it's already time for us to return home, so the project coordinators came back, and the next project coordinators went, and this is now class 2. And they built out a maize project. There was a lot of justification for maize as the crop selection that harvest. They were able to build out a partnership with World Vision to get the specialty seed, and they built out, they planted all of this maize to then not get rain again, and here we are again with nothing really to show after a harvest. Pretty tough spot. They had a second rain in that calendar year, and they decided to go with cassava. I know I'm talking to a room of people who are cassava experts, so I won't pretend that I am. But from what I know about cassava, it can grow in pretty drought-resistant areas. And they built out cassava, and they're like, at least we'll be able to get something going here. This'll be our last-ditch effort here. And then this is the picture of the cassava harvest that year. So that's Mzee Rubini, one of our 9 farmers that we work with in our Kwakaliga project, kind of showing us pretty dire situations. Now we're at 3 years, nothing really to show for the harvest. No rain had come on any of the plant harvests, and people are getting pretty dire starvation circumstances. This time last year, 2013, I was on the phone with my staff who are in Tanzania, and they said, Baker, oh, everyone calls me by my last name. They goes, Baker, we're in a tough spot. We're at a point where we're probably going to have to go to the funerals of our partners, people who become our family and friends, and we're really not sure what to do. Do we give them food? That seems like it's out of mission for us. It also seems like there could be a lot of unintended consequences of dropping off food to 9 families that we work with in a starving community of 1,500 people. But do we just sit there and let these family members of ours now essentially starve? And so we figured out the short-term thing, and just as everyone always asks, well, what was that short-term solution? We ended up putting a little bit more money into my staff's monthly food allocation so that they happen to cook extra and would bring it over on a regular basis to our partners. But long-term, they realized, we don't know if there's going to be rains coming. There's 1,500 people here who only know how to work the land, and we can keep trying to do land-based agriculture here, or we can just say, we don't know, let's try something else. And so Class 3's project coordinators, this is people in 2013, built out a chicken coop livestock keeping project. They built 3 bandas, 100 chickens among those 3 bandas. It's an integrated system in which there's crops, They're doing onions right now, 3 rows outside of the bandas. They have a water management system that's evolved that allows them to capture the very little rain they get in order to keep those integrated systems moving. And now we're at a situation, and a year later, after we've had a series of very tough conversations about starvation with our partners, where they're sitting on 3 million shillings in their business savings. That's the equivalent of $2,000. And that's been because they've been able to get this business up and moving. They're able to connect it to the right markets, predominantly in Dar es Salaam, where there's a strong expat community that loves that we're producing yellow yolk eggs right now. They don't get that otherwise, so they're paying a nice price for it, and we're able to benefit from it. When I was in Tanzania in February, I actually had 3 rows of chicken eggs on my lap for 5 hours going to Dar es Salaam to deliver it to the market. They're now at a place where they're able to triple their business. And so this month they're going to have 300 chickens in their coops, and these 9 families are reinvesting in that business to really get that momentum moving. And so one of the really special moments for me in this last trip was to take this picture. And this is Mzee Macharo, Mzee Rumbani's colleague and dear friend, and next door neighbors essentially. And this is Mzee Macharo standing against this banda. A year later, this is the rows of integrated system here. You can see the water management piping that's going through to keep it all running. Over this way, the whole little chicken pen goes in and out. We're at a point now where we're not worrying if they're going to be able to eat. We're not worried if they're going to be able to survive, and we're not worried that they're not going to be able to push this forward on their own. They feel this is their project, this is their ownership. One of the really special moments also on this trip was I was in Kwakaliga, and Timmy Boone, who's one of our project coordinators, I'll talk a little bit about what that all looks like in a second. Timmy Boone he's 23, I believe, from San Diego, really great guy, and he was translating for me as I was conversing with Mzee Macharo. And I asked Mzee, I was like, tell me more about what this has meant for you, right? Like, I remember last year things were looking pretty dire. And he said, kind of emotionless in a very kind of matter-of-fact way, he said, well, the other day I walked behind his 2 teenage sons, and he's like, I walked behind my teenage sons, and I overheard them talking about how they were going to take over the family business. And he's like, that's not even something I thought I could ever deliver my kids. Something where they were able to dream about their future. He's like, I'm good at knowing how to survive today and make sure my family and loved ones know how to survive today. To be able to think about the future and to have something that my kids want to take over and push, and they see there's legitimacy, they see the return on that, is something I never dreamed of as a father. And so this is a project that is near and dear to our heart, and I think it speaks a lot to what we're trying to do. It is not about having a solution that we're trying to push into communities. 3 years ago, we would have never believed we'd be doing chickens in Kwakaliga. Back then, we were doing sunflower seeds, right? And then we had strapped ourselves into metrics and all these strategic plans around sunflower seeds. I don't know where our partners would be right now. So we're trying to build out that muscle of adaptability, that muscle of creative problem solving, such that they can push forward on their own challenges. The other project I want to talk through, because it kind of offers a different lens to the way 2Seeds functions, is our Masoko project. So 7 of our 8 projects are based in the village. They are very similar to what you saw in the video, very similar to the storyline of Kwakaliga. They are highly community-centered, and you're really kind of working with a small group of people. Masoko in Swahili means market, if you're familiar, and so this project these 2 project coordinators sit in Dar es Salaam, which is one of the major cities in Tanzania, and its whole purpose is to think about the market access of the 7 villages and think about how you've got this footprint of projects that are doing their thing, they're thinking about quality production, they're thinking about distribution. How do we make sure they're getting to market and they're able to get the kind of price they need in order to survive? And so they think at a very different level. Masoko primarily focuses on this market. This is the Kariakoo market in Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam. It's the largest market in Tanzania, and so it ends up dictating a lot of the prices. A lot of farmers are looking to this market to understand what things are going for. A lot of other markets are kind of basing their information off Kariakoo. So let's get to the heartbeat. Let's go to Kariakoo. When Class 1 arrived in Kariakoo and they started to realize there's very little management of this market, there's definitely a leadership structure, there's definitely a general manager, but there's no transparency with the prices. There's hundreds of vendors all within here, and there's like a basement level. I mean, all outside. It's overflowing with people who are selling their crops and their produce and their spices and their goods. But there's very little transparency to actually know what things are going for and to have an analytical mind about how you as a seller would interact with the market. And so they got to know the market and how it functioned a little bit and realized there was a statistician on staff, and he would go around with a pencil and paper and he'd write down what things were going for. What is rice right now? What is a pili pili ho-ho, green pepper? You know, what is a mango? And go around and do that. It was being done very inconsistently, and it was being done without any real record filing. So what was happening with that information? Nobody really knows. It certainly wasn't being used by farmers. Class 2, with that information, really understanding kind of the lay of the land, launched a business competition and said, if you're an IT professional in Tanzania, particularly if you're a local Tanzanian, we want to know what your best ideas are to solve this challenge, to think about price transparency, crop price transparency to farmers. From that, we were able to source out this SMS platform that we now use. And the beautiful thing of the way 2Seeds works is we had an initial pilot with our 7 projects out around around Korogwe. And so now our project coordinators are training Henry, the statistician who previously was pencil to paper inconsistent, training him, working with the general manager to say, this is what it means to stay accountable, to be getting those prices regularly. He goes around now with an iPhone, pretty much an iPhone, and is able to enter right into the system that they built through the business competition plan that tracks it all and then reports it out into a system, a platform system. So now if you're a farmer, so I watched Mzee Mancharo and Pakaliga do this, what is an onion going for? He types it into this number and it pops up. Carico market right now is this is the price today and this is the aggregate price over some period of time. And that's what you see here. So I took this morning. This is a screenshot of this morning. This is the Carico website, which our project coordinators also help to do, get them online, get them moving. And you can see right here that rice is going for about $1.15 a kilo at the Carico market. The vision on this is, well, okay, this is something, and our farmers are using them, so how do we get more farmers to be interacting with this, but also how do we get other markets outside of Carico onto a system like this that can then feed an overall system with your Mzee Mancharo. I want to know what rice is. I want to know what it is at Korogwe. I want to know what it is in Carico. I want to know what it is in Arusha. And I, as a farmer, then know how to bundle, where to bundle, what price I'm getting, and all of that good stuff. So getting folks in the driver's seat, again, other economic potentials. I want to talk a little bit about another side of what we do, the village projects, the specialized projects. This is how we're starting to see that value chain become complete, right? And really kind of working across that value chain. But it's not enough, we believe, to just see that value chain. How do you strengthen it as well? So we do a lot of network-wide initiatives. So these are all 1,000 partners across our network come together once every 6 months for a summit, and we're able to share best practices. We're able to kind of incubate that human capital that way. But one of the things we found in year 4 of what we're doing is that there's a lot of income being generated by our farmers with not the corresponding knowledge of how to manage income and how to really make it work for yourself. So this is a business curriculum session that I snapped a shot of. Ana Lahosha, right here in the red, is our country director. She's an MBA from Brazil, and she runs our operations on the ground. And getting ahead of this exact issue, built out a proprietary 10-unit business curriculum. It starts with concepts. Unit 1 is the concept of expense, revenue, and profit, introducing those strictly as definitions and concepts. You work your way through, and you're learning things like cash flow. You're learning things like savings. You're learning things like what is the difference between business and personal savings and money, separating those two things. And you land, Unit 9 is return on investment as a concept, as well as Unit 10, which starts to build out, here's how you think about a business plan. This is only really done at a certain point in a project. Really kind of need the project to be at a point where it's got something moving such that a business curriculum then has experiential application. And we found that in 5 of our projects right now. So 5 of our projects are going through this 10-unit curriculum. 2 of them have graduated. They're having a ceremony next month. And the thing that really fascinates me about this curriculum and how it's developed is that 60 to 70% of our partners are blind or illiterate. And so that has meant that we've had to be able to talk about concepts like savings with metaphors, with things they can touch, pictures if they're illiterate, and translating the pictures to those who are blind. And so it's a very unique challenge in trying to really help our partners become, again, more in the driver's seat of their own income generation. The other network-wide initiative that I think is really unique to 2Seeds and is worth talking about is our Tanzania Advisory Council. So one of the things that we interact with a lot in Tanzania are some of the cultural norms around leadership and who is a leader in a village context. And often it's tied to gender, often it's tied to age, often it's tied to wealth. But what we do see are these individuals who maybe don't fall into those categories, who are super effective at leadership by way of motivating people, keeping them accountable, helping people buy into a vision and move forward. And we have identified those individuals in our projects, and one from each of our projects developed a Tanzania Advisory Council. What we do with these folks is once a month convene them and think about their competence and their connections differently. So we're training them on how they see the network. How do they see the whole enchilada, the whole big picture, and how they can make it pop and do more for the individuals involved. So we're training them on network-wide initiatives. How do we coordinate sales? If Lutindi's selling cabbage and Fungu's selling cabbage, how do we make sure that they're on the same track? Because they're coming from the mountains, it's going to be a heck of a lot cheaper, and we know how to get them to the right buyer. We don't want to be part of that equation. We want them to be part of that equation. And so having leadership in that is we think, crucial to the whole equation. We're also thinking about network-wide funds. So again, with this income generation, does it make sense to be pooling money? We haven't yet, but it's a conversation we're having very actively right now. Does it make sense to be pooling money for the network so that the network can be doing things across it? So again, should we be buying a truck as a network? And the proceeds from their income generating projects is feeding that over the course of a few years. We'll be in that position. That's their call to make, not ours. And then lastly, when we think about expansion. So we're in 8 communities right now. 7 village, 1 specialized. What does that mean for us after that? Are we thinking about scale geographically? Are we thinking about scale in the communities we exist in right now? Those are big questions for us, and we want them to be leading us on them. If it is a geographic expansion to new villages, we do not want to be the first handshake and hello. It's them, and they really are owning that network feel and how it pushes it forward. So I've been mentioning this thing of project coordinators throughout the whole time, and I want to talk a little bit about this side of our mission. The way we really see our work is that we have a mission in our project coordinators and through our project coordinators. Our project coordinators are year-long volunteers, and they're really the tip of the spear of what we're trying to do here. Typically, our project coordinators are graduates or young professionals. There's no real limit to that profile, but we've trended towards 35 and under. What we look for are really a values fit. We hold 6 values very core to 2Seeds. I would say our 2 predominant ones are humility and self-awareness, and we screen very heavily on those 2 fronts. With that in mind, we also are checking out how passionate are you about the values and the mission of the organization. Are you motivated to use your skills to solve big problems? Are you open and resilient to thrive in resource-poor, relationship-rich communities? And what's your strength of character to lead in highly challenging environments? We really are looking for a person who's very comfortable in ambiguity, knows how to relationship build, knows how to bring somebody into an idea and into a process, and be able to deliver results both income-wise as well as relationship-wise. So we've now had 50 alums of 2Seeds. We are in the process right now of onboarding our 5th class, who will go to Tanzania in August. Again, 16 in that class. And our project coordinators become really the meat and potatoes of what 2Seeds is about. We take very seriously then, as I said, we kind of think about the human capital for everybody involved, how we're building out the human capital of our project coordinators, we call them PCs. So we see this as an accelerated leadership development component of our work. It's a year-long training program in hard and soft skills necessary for leadership. One of our board members is the former Dean of Business at MIT, Professor Dick Schmalensee, and we do a training in April every year, and he does this kind of 15-minute leadership overview. I think he's the only man who could do the topic of leadership in 15 minutes. And it really boils down to one of my favorite things, where he says, I could give you the textbook on leadership, I wrote the textbook on leadership. He goes, but you can't know how you will be in certain situations until you are in them. And 2Seeds puts you in those situations where you have to answer questions like, how do I inspire people when I myself am crippled with doubt? I don't know how to do that. Do you know how to do that? Right? Like that's a very hard thing to just know how to do in your mind or through a textbook or a classroom setting. You have to be out there in those circumstances, grappling with the moral, strategic, financial components of all of these decisions and recognizing that this is high stakes work, right? This is not just, oh, we got a failed harvest. It's we have a failed harvest and now our partners are likely in a different situation than we would have rather liked. So you really are going through a training program on that stuff, both experientially and then twice a month there's formal training on the ground in Tanzania. We pair each team of project coordinators with a project mentor. Stephanie Kurz sits as a mentor with 2Seeds and has since class two. She's right now mentoring actually both the Kwakwaliga and Masoko project that I talked through. Your project mentor is a mid to advanced career professional who has sat at these leadership crossroads before. And I think probably is very humble that there are no answers to these big questions, right? It's about how you kind of navigate through the ambiguity of them. And it becomes a very dedicated relationship, a very strong thought partner relationship, and one that very often has post-year-long, after you become an alum, implications. People stay very close to their mentors. We do have fundraising component to this work, and we believe that the function there, besides providing capital to support your time there, is to develop a diverse network of investors. It's the same muscle that happens on the ground in Tanzania as a project coordinator when you are encouraging people to invest their resource of time as a farmer in Tanzania and to come be part of a project that you're going to help build together. The same muscle that you're using in fundraising. Give me your resource, often money at that point, and let's build this together. And so there's a component to that we think feeds that leadership and professional development that we do. Our alum come back fluent in Swahili, which is often a very important skill for, increasingly so in the geopolitical sphere of careers. So we think that's one of the most important things we do right up front is help our project coordinators become fluent in Swahili. It's both for safety and legitimacy purposes, and it's a skill you can carry with you for the rest of your life. And I say this last point here because I think it's the thing that our project coordinator alums tell us all the time, that in a year, me investing a year in a context like 2Seeds, I feel like I know what my mettle is as a person. I feel like I have had a mirror put in front of me. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm bad at. I know what scares me. I know what thrills me. I know how I interact with people in really stressful situations and sometimes not so stressful situations. I know how to manage up. I think I know how to manage down, left and right. You kind of have a full 360 view of yourself to say, here's who I think I am, and here's what I think I have to offer for whatever direction your career goes after. We have alums who go into medicine. We have alums who've gone into teaching. We've had alums who've gone into further development work, business, agriculture work, you name it. We've had, of our 60 alums, all of those and more. So we care less about what you're doing after you're at 2Seeds and more about how far did you push your confidence and how far did you open up your connections such that now you can go fill your human potential as you did with your Tanzanian partners for a year as well. So that is my presentation. And I know I said a lot here, and my mother says I talked too quickly, so I probably said it too quickly. What I'd love to do now is open up for Q&A, see what questions are on your mind, either clarification or challenging on premises and philosophies. I'm open for that too. So I'd open up the floor to see what questions or comments you guys have for me. Yeah.
Talk a lot about building human capital
Yep.
and investing in that. What are the main indicators that you use to measure your success? Because there are a lot of times in nonprofit environments, a lot of times they kind of settle for anecdotes and things like that rather than actually some hard information. So what do you use to measure that and have a threshold?
Yeah, so so my whole career is in nonprofits. I'd love to talk to anyone who thinks a nonprofit gets this right, because I think the human evaluation is the tough one, right? So we end up using indicators like certainly income generation and how far people are increasing that year over year, and harvest over harvest is an indication to us of something. So we do track that. One of the big things we do is knowledge retention. So we care less about that you sat in a training and we trained on savings, or let's say we trained on cash flow. We care less about that you sat there and went through that. We care more about that you know how to apply it in your everyday life. How do you measure that? It's a little bit of a tricky thing. But when we see indications of that, we kind of claim that point. We say, oh, there it is. We just saw that play out, and it was kind of prompted from a knowledge retention of a training. I was telling Gary Mullins in a previous conversation about in Tabora, where we have a food processing venture. It's 8 women who are running now food processing. And they're kind of packaging up every Monday. They're working in a kitchen, packaging up every Monday, whatever is the order of the week. And they are the community that has gone the farthest so far in the business curriculum. So they actually are one of the communities that has graduated. And I was there in February, and I was watching these women in the kitchen. On Monday, I was helping them kind of, I think they were doing chips or peanuts that day. And so it was chips, because they were taking the chips from one area of the kitchen to another, this woman was, and a chip had fell on the ground. And they all started screaming, cash flow, that's our profit, right? Like they all started just saying, and this woman was like, oh my God, okay, I'm sorry. But that to us, indicator, like they get what's going on, they get how it works together. And so do we have a perfect system for capturing all that? Not right now. Is it a major priority for us? Yes. And do I know anyone who does it really, really well? No, and if you guys do, please let me know. Please let me know. Yeah?
If a community was to come to you that was not in Africa,
Mhm.
would you open your door to them, and would you go help them, or do they have to meet specific requirements?
Yeah, it's a live conversation for us right now as an organization. I was in a lunch last week with somebody who was asking if we had any interest in moving to Latin America, and you know, the answer from my perspective is yes, because we are agricultural development because 80% of Tanzanians are farmers, right? And so that's the space in which productivity exists in that community. Now, for us to take this model, if you want to call it a model, which I think is just a de-engineered simplicity of fundamentals of like, let's just talk to people and see what's up and then build a product together. If you take that formula and you put it in a whole other productivity context, I think it would still work, right? We'd want to pilot that and see what potential is really there. But I don't see why it would be a game. I don't know why we would stop that, particularly if there was, strategic partnerships that can make that happen more easily. So we're thinking very, very actively about what does expansion and scale mean for 2Seeds. And when we think about kind of scaling impact, is it dots on a map, or is it within the context of the community itself and scaling from 9 families in Kwakaliga to 20 families? And what does that look like? And what kind of network-wide initiatives, things we don't even know yet, we'll have to go into making sure that's strong and quality and sustainable. So those are the big questions for us. The short answer to your question is yes, likely. So thank you. Yeah.
Do you think that the local government or the Tanzanian government, they don't have any agricultural extension work doing this sort of work?
So the local government, do they have agricultural
extension work?
Yeah.
This is more or less an extension work what you have done for over a period of time. But they don't have any permanent arrangement for extension work, maybe through the local counties and other things. They don't have.
Yeah, so a lot of our projects, so the regional agricultural layout is that there's a regional agricultural officer in each of the areas in which we work. What we have found is that's sometimes a challenge to rely on how up-to-date their information is and their knowledge base in some of the areas is. Certainly one of the challenges we're seeing across our network in all of our projects is that things are just moving really quick, right? Like climate change is coming, that stuff is hitting faster than people are able to adapt to. And so there are certainly agricultural resources that the Tanzanian government has, both congregated in a place like Dar es Salaam in the capital, as well as in the regions. I think it's inconsistent in its value and asset to the work we're doing. We're certainly very much in conversation. We're certainly very in the know with each other about what's going on. And I think now what we see is that a lot of the agricultural officers are coming to us to say, and to the projects and to our partners, to say, tell me what you did here, because I think I can bring this to other communities. So it is a way to also be thinking about scale, is kind of strengthening the human capital of the network of agricultural expertise that's already government put out there such that they become better stewards and ambassadors across the country.
And one more question is, what is the source of funding for this 2Seeds network? The source of funding?
Yep. So, sure. So in 2013, we're about a $500,000 organization. We are all privately funded, so about 2/3 of that comes from the project coordinators themselves that raise the money that then supports them for the year, and I can go into more details if necessary. And then the 1/3 is covered by the infrastructure, so that's what I'm doing all the time is fundraising for 2Seeds. Right now it's private, and we're hoping to kind of diversify our portfolio over time. Certainly as we talk about scale, that's an intentional conversation we want to be having to make sure it's working hand in hand. Yeah.
How do you pick which people you'll work with in the communities? Like, how does that process work? Do they have to meet certain requirements and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think so. When I was there, things are happening on the ground, and I was there with one of our co-founders, Jim Meeks, who you saw in the video, and this is a live conversation for us because we're like, what exactly, like, why is Mzee Charo here and Mzee Rubini, but not this gentleman over here? Like, what was that about? Our hypothesis and our bet is that, and this is kind of a playbook I think out of the business field too, which is these people were early adopters. These people were entrepreneurial in their ability to take on the risk, trust some innovation, and hope it worked out. And they had a ton of resilience. So talk about that Kwaku project. That's 3 years of resilience. One of the heartache stories, but like this Disney movie triumph moment was that Kwaku during these every 6-month summits, the members of Kwaku would come and be like, we've got nothing, and they'd sit down, and they'd stand up and be like, we still have nothing, and they'd sit down and stand up, and everyone else was able to share this progress, and Kwaku just didn't have progress to show. And then this last one, they stood up and were like, we've got a lot of money going on, and we've got this whole thing going, and they served eggs to everybody, and it was this huge triumph moment. But again, that took a lot of resilience to be able to know that things were going to work out, and that failure didn't mean total failure. It started to look like it might, right? But we were able to adapt and be creative in kind of like the 11th hour there. But we think that there's something about early adopters, and what we saw was a lot of people who were kind of doing this let me see what plays out and then I'll go in. And now that things are playing out, we're getting a lot of knocking on the doors from their neighbors and community members being like, how can I get in on this chicken coop? What can I do to we do another bond? I'd love to be a part of that. And so now that it's a proven entity in a way, there's kind of that next stage of people who are interested in being a part of it. So what is the rubric for those first people? I think it's who's raising their hand and who's sticking around and who is willing to be trusting and kind of really entrepreneurial with us. So it's less of a, here are the 5 things we need to see, and more of the self-evident.
How was the continuity from class to class?
It's a good question. So we have our kind of program year. I'll do the quick overview of it. So right now we just selected our 5th class. So we were interviewing February and March. We had this training weekend in Boston in April. Final offers went out last week. We're getting answers this week. And so we will go through a medical clearance background check process, just make sure everyone's good to go. And then there's 3 months of a pre-departure curriculum. So you're learning Swahili, you're working on the fundraising component, you're kind of getting brief lessons, teaser lessons on project management, you're understanding your project, you're talking to the alums of the project, particularly beforehand, you're understanding the history and the context of the culture you're about to walk into. So we do all of that over 3 months, 12 weeks. You depart in August. There's a 10-day orientation on the ground that the Tanzanian, our ground staff runs. And then you're in your project by late August. The rains come in roughly October-ish, so you kind of have a first rains to really capitalize on the project there. And then you go through the full year and you depart in July. And so it's about a 15 months, it's 12 months on the ground, 15 months if you take pre-departure into the picture. The really interesting thing about 2Seeds, I was talking about this in an earlier meeting today as well, is that we, if you do the math on that calendar, we have a month where nobody's in the projects. So our project coordinators, class 4 right now, will leave July 10th, and the next team will arrive, do their orientation, and be placed by mid to late August. So there's a month where there's no full-time 2Seeds presence in the community. We get pushed on that a lot. It's counterintuitive to any NGO I know out there. If you guys know someone who does it this way, I'd love to meet them, because we get criticized a lot on the, like, where's the warm handoff? Don't you need Joe to introduce Sally to Manjaro? And I think circumstances have kind of forced us into having that gap just because of what we can onboard and prepare and get people on the ground on the kind of infrastructural support side. But I think it's a data point I would really fight for. Because what we see is in that month, 6 weeks period of time, we know if the community pushed the ball forward while nobody was there. And to remove that means we are 2Seeds, not them. And what we've seen, particularly in, I'm trying to think of a good project that played this out. I would say Lutindi plays this out really well, where, let's say, class 1, they're working with their partners, identifying their partners, thinking about what the project's going to be, build out a project. No one's there for about 6 weeks. Community stepped up. They pushed those balls forward. The next class comes in and goes, okay, this is where we're operating. Great. And they kind of move forward on the project and maybe added certain elements, different initiatives, and they leave 6 months or 6 weeks gap. Community stepped up again. This is what we need to do. And so what we saw was this step change in which the community was owning the project. We were not. And what we'd love to see, and what our hypothesis is going to be, is that there's going to be a point where we can drop off as full-time presence, and we can, as an organization, be much more of a consultative, maybe once a month coming to visit. What's going on? What do you guys need help with? But it's theirs, not ours. And we're really trying to move that current. That I think it's a little counterintuitive. If you're thinking about the organization, it makes all the sense in the world if you're thinking about the community. Any last questions? I don't know what time it is, actually. Oh, almost perfect. Okay, well, so I'm going to hang out for a little bit. I'll be around for any questions. I have materials if you're interested in learning more. I will say that if there's anyone in this room who raised their hand as not sure what they're doing come May and they're interested in 2Seeds, we are still open to candidates for the class that will leave in August. So if you or somebody you know is interested in that, please let me know. That's definitely a live conversation for us. So thank you so much for having me. I hope I shared a little bit of something that was interesting, walk away thinking about something, and please feel free to reach out anytime. I'm very grateful to be here. Thanks.